It's certainly the case that over some 50 years I've worked in many different forms. My background is as a painter. I was a painting student in the late 60s and early 1970s. And although my paintings were abstract, they were non-figurative paintings, it was clear, I think, that light was behind the abstract language that I was working with. That interest in light led me increasingly to work with photography, and looking at light through the camera led me to be able to work with the body as a subject, enabling me to work in areas of performance and contemporary dance. And that physical inhabitation of space enabled me then, I think, to realize that I could work and wanted to work within architectural space and occasionally in public spaces. I suppose for many, the concept of an archive would be entirely to do with documentation of retrievable information about an artist's work. What matters for me about an archive or some sort of resource around the work that I have made is to begin to approach the possibility of excavating meaning over time. It's this question of making visible these arcs of time that involve relationships that might remain extremely vivid and alive, or that may fall away and then recur. I think all of this is entirely possible and very important. It involves a very big question for me as an artist, and that's always been present, and it's how you might relate yourself to the conventions of your time. I'm very conscious of the fact that paying so much attention to the past, so to speak, prompted me, rather urged me to want to focus more emphatically on the future. Something that matters to me enormously in my working life is the nature of connectedness of relationships. These might be formal relationships between one piece of work and another, and they may be, very importantly, to do with the significance of working relationships with other people. For me, the studio is the heart of my work, really. But at the same time, I've always tried to think of the studio in the present moment, as being in the moment. It's certainly true that I write a lot. I've published a modest amount over the years, but I've also written a lot that remains as yet unpublished, and so I'm aware of the fact that I've had an interest in language that has, in a sense, been in tandem with my love of visual art of our time, and that love of language, of literature, and of language, I suppose it surfaced most evidently to me in the 1970s or 80s in my interest in titling works and wanting to open a door for a viewer into a piece of work through the possibility of poetic association. I see within the realm of archive two dimensions of written language, really. One is information and trying to make that as clear as possible to someone who may be looking at something without me there to point, but also to bring about this possibility of poetic connections, this being established in a viewer or a reader's mind. In and around, say, the 1980s, poetry seemed to fall away as a vivid and vibrant medium. But now, I'm glad to say, I notice, the poetics are everywhere. It's the poetics of architecture, the poetics of this, the poetics of that. And poetry is being read and it's being broadcast, and it's once again inhabiting an extremely significant role. And very often, something intertwined with visual culture at the same time. There's a very, very lovely quote by Samuel Beckett in which he says very simply, "Dance first, think later. It's the natural order." And this notion of dance or invention, or I might add dream or reverie, it's a dimension of experience that I value greatly. Julia Kristeva has a fantastic expression of becoming aware of something as if from behind the back of your consciousness. Just realizing something is there as a thought. And these experiences are very present for me in the development of my own work as an artist, and they're also very present experiences in terms of the relationships that I find I'm establishing with the work of others. It certainly seems to me that invariably the collaborative works that I have made with other artists in performance, for example, or installation, that the working relationship has embraced within it an explicit and vital sense of trust between the participants about the authorship, the ownership, the genesis of the work. And that's not to say that authorship is always worded in the same way. I think in almost every sense, every collaborative work that I've been involved with has involved the development of a different form of acknowledgement, with, by, together. But these dimensions of a collaborative relationship, I think, are a part of the very sensitive and genuine lived experience of working together in a way which is always intense. I met the poet Seamus Heaney at Harvard in 1994. I was a visiting artist there for a semester, and I overlapped with Seamus, who was a regular visiting professor in the Department of English at the time. When he came to hear and to see my installation Canopy, I asked him if he would write something for a forthcoming book about the development of that particular piece of work of mine. And it thrilled me and moved me very deeply when I received the first of several faxes from him, and that he hadn't written, as it were, a conventional introduction or foreword for a book. He'd written a poem. We then corresponded by fax over a period of time as he developed and altered and changed the content slightly, made small, subtle changes that a poet would make. But I had no idea that I still had the fax correspondence from 1994-95 from Seamus about the development of that poem, how it emerged, the changes that he made. And I do, and I've managed to stabilize it before the faxes themselves disappeared from sight through the passage of time working on their very fugitive materials. In recent years, I've had the opportunity to make two really very large-scale light projection works. One titled Rink, that was commissioned by and shown on the 30-metre floor of the wonderful Ambika P3 space at Westminster University. And the other, more recent, Footfalls work, which I made projected onto the west-facing side wall of Rambert Dance Studios on the South Bank. They both involved extremely fine new digital technologies in order to make the projections possible. Footfalls for Rambert involved me in making extremely high-definition photographs of the soles of the feet of all of the dancers. For me, the invitation to make that work involved two dimensions that have been recurring, a constant really in my work for a long time, and that is formally expressed the relationship between a horizontal plane and a vertical plane. And in this instance, what a viewer saw on the side wall, the sole of a dancer's foot writ large on that vertical plane, when behind that wall on the horizontal plane are the rehearsal studios of the dance company. Something is summed up that has been present in my preoccupations for a long time. And central to both of them is how the viewer might feel actively engaged and a participant in the work. I think that I've always recognized intuitively that it is the viewer who completes the work. It's always the viewer that completes the work. If the archive and the work have what probably needs to be a genuine sort of symbiotic relationship, I'd like to think that the way the archive is shaping up, that it embodies something of the openness that I seek to sustain in the work that I do.